It's 11:47 p.m., and you're replaying a conversation from 3 years ago. A specific sentence you said, the exact way the other person paused before responding, the look that crossed their face for half a second that you've been analyzing on and off ever since. You're not sure why you remembered it tonight. You're just lying there in the dark, building entire alternate versions of what you should have said instead. If that sounds familiar, you're not broken. You're not crazy. You're not even alone. But something very specific is happening in your brain that's completely different from what's happening in everyone else's. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your own mind quite the same way again. Let's start with what overthinking actually is, because most people get this wrong. They think it's just thinking a lot. It isn't. In 1991, a psychologist named Susan Nolan Hoeksema at Yale University gave the phenomenon a clinical name: rumination. The repetitive passive focus on negative thoughts, on their causes, their consequences, what they mean about you, what you should have done differently. Not problem solving, not analysis, just the loop, endless, recursive, going nowhere. Her studies followed thousands of people over years, and what she found was unsettling. People who scored high on rumination were dramatically more likely to develop depression and anxiety in the years that followed. Not because they were already depressed, because the thinking style itself was the precursor. The mind built the trap. But here's where it gets interesting. Because in 2003, one of her students, Wendy Trainer, dug deeper. Trainer noticed that not all overthinking was the same, so she split rumination into two completely different types. The first she called reflection, genuine self-inquiry, asking why something happened, searching for insight. This kind of thinking, even when it's heavy, tends to leave people slightly better off than before they started. The second she called brooding, passive, helpless dwelling. Why does this always happen to me? What did I do wrong? Why am I like this? Brooding doesn't ask questions to find answers. It asks questions to confirm what you already believe about yourself. And brooding, Trainer found, was directly linked to worsening depression over time. Here is the part almost no one talks about. Most overthinkers think they're reflecting. They're actually brooding. The two feel almost identical from the inside, but one solves problems. The other is the problem. So, how does this happen in the brain itself? Why do some people slip into the loop so easily, while others can put a thought down and walk away from it? This is where Marcus Rachel comes in. In 2001, Rachel was a neurologist at Washington University in St. Louis, running brain scans. He noticed something nobody else had. The brain wasn't quiet during rest. It was lit up. A specific set of regions firing the moment a person stopped focusing on the external world. He called it the default mode network, the part of you responsible for self-reflection, for memory, for imagining the future, for making sense of who you are. For most people, this network turns on when they're alone with their thoughts and turns off the moment something demands their attention. For an overthinker, that switch is broken. Their default mode network stays on. Even at work, even in conversation, even when they're trying to fall asleep, a constant low-frequency hum of self-analysis that the brain cannot turn off, no matter how exhausted the person is. In 2005, psychiatrist Yvette Chalene found something even more specific. In people with chronic rumination, the default mode network had become hyper-connected to a region of the brain associated with sadness. The thinking system and the feeling system had fused. Every thought now carried a small dose of negative emotion attached to it, automatically. That's why overthinkers can't just stop. The loop isn't running because of what they're thinking. The loop is running because of how their brain is wired. But why does this happen to some people and not others? Overthinking tends to develop in childhoods, where the environment was unpredictable, where a parent's mood shifted suddenly, where reading the room correctly was, in some quiet way, a survival skill. The child who grew up in that home learned to scan, to anticipate, to analyze. They learned that thinking ahead protected them. Then they grew up. The environment changed, but the operating system didn't. The terrible irony is that overthinking doesn't actually solve problems. Nolan Hoeksema's research showed this clearly. People who ruminate longer about their problems make worse decisions, not better ones. They wait longer to take action. They predict outcomes less accurately than people who barely think about the problem at all. The thinking feels productive. It's not. It's a slot machine that pays out in fake confidence and never in answers. The decision that took you 3 weeks to make and was wrong anyway. The conversation you rehearsed 12 different ways and abandoned the moment it started. The job you didn't apply for because you ran the rejection in your mind so many times that the rejection felt real before you ever submitted. This is what rumination costs. Not bad decisions, worse than that. Decisions that never get made at all. Studies by John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts have found that the most effective interventions for chronic rumination are not cognitive. They're physical, movement, sensation, breath. The body brought into the present moment by force, dragging the brain back from the loop. Here is what almost no one tells overthinkers, though. Your brain is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it learned to do. It scanned the environment. It found patterns in chaos. It kept you safe in a world that was harder to read than it should have been. The thinking style that exhausts you now is the thing that protected you then. You don't need to fix it. You need to teach it that the danger is over. If this resonated with you, watch your own thinking the next time it starts. Is it genuinely searching for an answer? Or is it just rehearsing the same fear in a slightly different costume? The first one is reflection. The second one is brooding. Once you can tell them apart in real time, you've already done what most people who overthink will never do. You've started watching the loop instead of being inside it.